She would wait and relax for a bar or two of white-lined time before going into the act of serving, and often bounced the ball once or twice, or pawed the ground a little, always at ease, always rather vague about the score, always cheerful, as she so seldom was in the dark life she led at home. Her tennis was the highest point to which I can imagine a young creature bringing the art of make-believe, although I dare say for her it was the very geometry of basic reality. The exquisite clarity of all her movements had its auditory counterpart in the pure ringing sound of her every stroke. The ball, when it entered her aura of control, became somehow whiter, its resilience somehow richer, and the instrument of precision she used upon it seemed inordinately prehensile and deliberate at the moment of clinging contact. Her form was indeed an absolutely perfect imitation of absolutely top-notch tennis, without any utilitarian results. As Edusa's sister, Electra Gold, a marvellous young coach, said to me once while I sat on a pulsating hard bench watching Dolores Hayes toying with Linda Hall and being beaten by her, "Dolly has a magnet in the centre of her racket guts, but why the heck is she so polite?" Ah, Electra, what did it matter with such grace? I remember at the first game I watched being drenched with an almost painful convulsion of beauty assimilation. My Lolita had a way of raising her bent left knee at the ample and springy start of the service cycle, when there would develop and hang in the sun for a second a vital web of balance between toed foot, pristine armpit, burnished arm, and far back-flung racket, as she smiled up with gleaming teeth at the small globe suspended so high in the zenith of the powerful and graceful cosmos she had created for the express purpose of falling upon it with a clean, resounding crack of her golden whip. It had, that serve of hers, beauty, directness, youth, a classical purity of trajectory, and was, despite its spanking pace, fairly easy to return, having as it did no twist or sting to its long, elegant hop. That I could have had all her strokes, all her enchantments, immortalized in segments of celluloid makes me moan today with frustration. They would have been so much more than the snapshots I burned. Her overhead volley was related to her service as the envoy is to the ballade. For she had been trained, my pet, to patter up at once to the net on her nimble, vivid, white-shod feet. There was nothing to choose between her forehand and backhand drives. They were mirror images of one another. My very loins still tingle with those pistol reports repeated by crisp echoes and Electra's cries. One of the pearls of Dolly's game was the short half-volley that Ned Lytton had taught her in California. She preferred acting to swimming and swimming to tennis, yet I insist that had not something within her been broken by me, not that I realized it then, she would have had on the top of her perfect game the will to win, and would have become a real girl champion. Dolores with 2 rackets under her arm in Wimbledon, Dolores endorsing a dromedary, Dolores turning professional, Dolores acting a girl champion in a movie, Dolores and her grey, humble, hushed husband coach, old Humbert. There was nothing wrong or deceitful in the spirit of her game, unless one considered her cheerful indifference towards its outcome as the feint of a nymphette. She, who was so cruel and crafty in everyday life, revealed an innocence, a frankness, a kindness of ball-placing that permitted a second-rate but determined player, no matter how uncouth and incompetent, to poke and cut his way to victory. Despite her small stature, she covered the 1,053 square feet of her half of the court with wonderful ease once she had entered into the rhythm of a rally, and as long as she could direct that rhythm, but any abrupt attack or sudden change of tactics on her adversary's part left her helpless. At match point, her second serve, which rather typically was even stronger and more stylish than her first, for she had none of the inhibitions that cautious winners have, would strike vibrantly the harpchord of the net and ricochet out of court. The polished gem of her drop shot was snapped up and put away by an opponent who seemed four-legged and wielded a crooked paddle. Her dramatic drives and lovely volleys would candidly fall at his feet. Over and over again she would land an easy one into the net, and merrily mimic dismay by drooping in a ballet attitude with her forelocks hanging. So sterile were her grace and whipper that she could not even win from panting me and my old-fashioned lifting drive. I suppose I am especially susceptible to the magic of games. In my chess sessions with Gaston, I saw the board as a square pool of limpid water with rare shells and stratagems rosily visible upon the smooth, tessellated bottom, which, to my confused adversary, was all ooze and squid cloud. Similarly, the initial tennis coaching I had inflicted on Lolita, prior to the revelations that came to her through the great Californian's lessons, remained in my mind as oppressive and distressful memories, not only because she had been so hopelessly and irritatingly irritated by every suggestion of mine, but because the precious symmetry of the court, instead of reflecting the harmonies latent in her, was utterly jumbled by the clumsiness and lassitude of the resentful child I mistaught. Now things were different, and on that particular day, in the pure air of Champion, Colorado, on that admirable court at the foot of steep stone stairs leading up to Champion Hotel where we had spent the night, I felt I could rest from the nightmare of unknown betrayals within the innocence of her style, of her soul, of her essential grace. She was hitting hard and flat, with her usual effortless sweep, feeding me deep skimming balls, all so rhythmically coordinated and overt as to reduce my footwork to practically a swinging stroll. Crack players will understand what I mean. My rather heavily cut serve that I had been taught by my father, who had learned it from de Cugis or Bormann, old friends of his and great champions, would have seriously troubled my low had I really tried to trouble her. But who would upset such a lucid deer? Did I ever mention that her bare arm bore the 8 of vaccination? That I loved her hopelessly? That she was only 14?